Not the chest, the face kind of. I'll show you. Maybe. Give the chest.
In the book, Memoirs of a Geisha, the main character states, "Now I understand the thing I've overlooked. The point wasn't to become a geisha, but to be one. To become a geisha, well, that was hardly a purpose in life. But to be a geisha, I could see it now as a stepping stone to something else." Well, today I want to outline for you the history of these so-called geishas that come primarily from Japan. And most specifically, I will mainly focus on the origins of these geishas, the effect World War II had on these geishas and vice versa, and finally end off on what they have become today. And just to give you a brief overview, I will now show you a clip I found online.
Mistresses of seduction, or something more elusive. Whatever a geisha is, it's more than a role. It's an all-encompassing way of life. Though it's true that some early geishas were prostitutes, the profession actually evolved from court entertainers in the 1600s.
The word geisha itself, of course, doesn't mean prostitute at all. It means artistic person.
Let's start off at the very beginning, where these so-called geishas began to appear in different parts of Japan. These places were known as the pleasure quarters, as you can see right here. They began to flourish as trade became popular among the middle class during the Edo period in the 17th century. This gave rise to the new popular high-end courtesan. But before geishas came along, there's another group that came before them that were the geiko, or the male version of a geisha. But these female geishas rose to popularity when they began to acquire a new set of skills and training, such as tea ceremonies, playing the shamisen, and dancing. And right there is a geisha playing this shamisen, obviously. And now let's fast forward to the mid-20th century, where the world is at war and Japanese geishas are caught in the crossfire. Because many men were sent off to fight for their countries during World War II, women were needed to join the workforce in order to fill in for the men. And because women were getting paid to work, they no longer saw the need to continuing practicing to become geishas. And once the U.S. started to slowly make their way to Japan and occupy their lands, many women saw this as an opportunity to make themselves up as a geisha. And, okay, so right here, these are not geisha, these are pretty much prostitutes dressing up as geisha to entertain the U.S. soldiers. And the caption even says right here for this picture, "Geisha girls were ready to lavish their attention on the American occupation soldier." These are geisha right here. You could tell by their kimono and their hairstyle versus these girls whose hair is more up with the times of the 1940s and 30s. Most had no formal training and would show up and claim they were geisha for the entertainment of the U.S. soldier. And because Japan was so influenced by Western ideas and customs and traditions, many of their old ways began to fade away. And this included the art and prestige of being a geisha. And And now I want to show you another clip that will lead up to my next point.
The geisha culture that flourished in Edo spread across Japan in the late 19th century. At the peak in the early 20th century, there were 80,000 geisha working nationwide, 1,200 in Asakusa alone. As times changed, geisha went into decline across Japan. Today, the number of geisha working in Asakusa has dropped to just 25.
And now we have come to the present day Japan, where geishas are still around, but not as popular as before. Modern day geishas have faded into obscurity, and their traditions have changed. For instance, instead of being hired for the sole entertainment of men, they have different roles of entertaining people at clubs, restaurants, etc. Most geishas today can be found in Kyoto, mostly in the districts Hanamachi, Shimbashi, Asakusa, and Kagurazaka. There are only about 1,000 to 2,000 at the most in each of these towns, and there are only about 10,000 left in all of Japan. In conclusion, in my speech today, I talked about the history of geishas from their origins, their decline during and after World War II, up until where they are today. As stated throughout my speech, geisha have a long history in Japan, even though they aren't as prevalent today. But we still can't deny their importance in Japanese culture and history. Thank you.
All right, Sam, what did you think?
Well, I'll start with the cons. I feel like you were hiding behind the podium, you know, and you're also like reading directly from your note cards. You could probably like, you know, interact with the audience a little bit more. But for the pros, I thought it was a really good topic. You know, never really like, I guess I never really thought about what they actually did and stuff like that. I learned a lot from your speech. I thought it was like your pronunciations on the names and stuff, like it was, I know they were pretty hard to like, you know, but it was, I mean, it sounded pretty good. And like your transitions, where like you used videos for your transitions, I thought that was good. And your visuals were also good. Yeah.
All right, well, I thought that you had a good quote at the beginning of the speech from the book that you were talking about, or that you quote from, but you seemed really kind of unfamiliar with it, and you're having to read it, and this is the start of the speech, so this is one of those places where you want to start off well. If everything doesn't get practice as much as it could be, because you did struggle a little bit with pronunciation on some of the terms later on, This at least should be something that flows smoothly, because this is where you have your chance to get everything right with the audience at the beginning. So I'd be a little bit more careful about that. Make sure that you weren't just reading it, that you really knew what the quote was, so that it's coming second nature to you. The topic is pretty clearly identified. I thought that you had a clear setup of the contents at the beginning of the speech, although it felt a little bit rushed. In the body of the speech, I didn't really hear that much signposting after the first point. The visuals that she's talking about, that she mentioned as transitions, actually I thought your first video was primarily definitional in nature, and that was fine. I wasn't sure what the second video clip was transitioning to. It felt a little bit like it was recapping information that we had in that first point, and so it ends up being, to me, a little bit more problematic, because the structure basically comes down to geishas before World War II and geishas after World War II. And when, well, you've kind of condensed hundreds of years of history into a short period of time, and I thought that there was not much development in that first section. There is a little bit of an explanation about how there was at one time prostitution that was associated with this, but that's not primarily what it was about. And it just felt underdeveloped in that segment there. And I think you needed to have a little bit more material on that. The material that talked about how it's changed after World War II because of the changes in employable opportunities, what the demands of the culture were, the westernization stuff, I thought that that was a little bit more clearly explained, and that worked pretty well. You did have a little bit of an issue with the visuals. I thought that you planned to have information in the speech pretty effectively, and that it was integrated well, but sometimes in the presentation things went a little haywire, like you were back and forth between a couple of slides at one point, and I should never put a laser pointer in somebody's hands, because you're waving it around like it's a sword, and you do not need the laser pointer. You can tell us what's going on there. It was a distraction. There's a little bit of dead space sometimes around when you were making your own transitions from the videos to back to speaking to the audience, and that feels a little bit awkward. I think when you're watching the video, you'll notice how those dead spaces just scream out for attention, and you don't want them to be that noticeable. So that would be something to work on as well. I thought the summary helped a little bit, kind of remind us of what the organizational structure was. I didn't hear any citations after that first section where you had the quote, and I know that you got the information from someplace. I believe that you are presenting real data, but I didn't, like I said, I don't think that got into the speech itself. And then the delivery things, we're not emphasizing those, but I think Sam mentioned a couple of them. You are behind the podium. You do have a tendency to start speaking to the screen at times, and the pronunciation issues, when you come up against a word that is a little bit tough, that's understandable that it's maybe going to be kind of awkward. I don't hold that against you, but it seems like there were a lot of words that were in that situation. It's not just that it's one complicated term that you struggled with. There were several names or periods of time or locations that you just needed to be a little bit more familiar with. And you're the one who's supposed to be kind of an expert on this subject, and I feel a little like I'm being given this tour of this culture by somebody who has only read the brochure right before I got there, as opposed to somebody who really knows the material well. All right, thank you.